couple things. First, disclosures. I'm actually still a Department of Defense employee in the Air Force, and these views do not necessarily represent the views of the Department of Defense, and probably not prevalent among most modern educators, so I'll leave it at that. As far as a further disclosure, I don't know, how many guys know Wendell Berry? Oh, you got to learn, you got to read some Wendell Berry. He's just a wonderful writer, very articulate. Wrote the book Life is a Miracle, and I like this quote: applying knowledge, scientific or otherwise, is an art. An artist is somebody who knows what to put where, when to put it. A good artist is one who applies knowledge skillfully, sensitively to the particular creatures and places of the world. How does one act well, sensitively, compassionately, without irreparable damage? On the basis of partial knowledge. And his point is that all of the knowledge that we have is partial. I think back when I was in medical school in the 80s, I'll date myself a little bit, you know, and I looked at, and then I went into, I'm a pediatrician, I went into pediatric residency. I remember several major changes that happened in the early 80s while I was in training. It caused remarkable consternation and debates and arguments. One of them was, how do you put babies down? Do they sleep on their back or their stomachs? What's the answer? On their backs. You guys all know that, but again, it was sacrosanct in the late 80s that babies went on their stomach. And when this discussion came up about putting babies on their back, there were children going to die. And we were having these major, all these deaths that were going to come from this bad research we were trusting out in New Zealand. And so again, we held on to these facets of knowledge as if they were sacrosanct, we could not breach them, that there would be major consequences. Well, guess what? There weren't, and actually it's reduced infant mortality. So why are you here? Why are you here getting education in medicine and dentistry? What are your end goals? You know, what are you looking for? Are you looking for, you know, for myself, it was a lot in medical school. I'm going to be a missionary. You know, and so I put pictures of the ministers. I'm going to be a competent dentist, provider, physical therapist, whatever you're here to study in at the schoolhouse. I'm going to be the best I can be in that area. Is it for the diploma? And I can tell you in a lot of societies, I talk to medical students about this question, and mainly high school students, why are you going to college? To get a degree. Why are you getting a degree? To get a good job. Why do you want to get a good job? To get good money. And that's about as good of a rationale as they can work you through. But you know, sometimes when we go into health, we think we are more noble. We're going in to help people. Yeah. But somewhere along the way, I see that in many of our hearts and our minds, that gets lost. And I'll be talking about that today. It isn't for the big house, right? Healthcare pays. It does. There's not a lot of unemployment, right? It's job security. There's a lot of things that you can find in healthcare. Are you going in because you want to be known? I'll talk about that a little bit more later. To have good colleagues or get the nice corner office, right? I want to move up in the organization, run the hospital. So why are you here? Why are you in medical education? Well, a story came across my desk literally this week. I got sent this email of a student who had so impacted the family while rotating down at, I mostly work at San Antonio Military Medical Center. And this student was there rotating in the ICU, and when he left the rotation, he was taking care of a critically ill, terminally ill patient, and the family gave him this cake. He so impacted them in his time there, they gave him this cake knowing that he was rotating off the service and going away, thanking him for how he connected with them. What a joy. What a privilege to be recognized by a family that you care for. So I want you to hold that picture in your mind, and I'm going to come back to it. But I want to talk a little bit about where education is drifted. You heard me talk about, in a sense, this idea of I get a, you know, go to a good school, get a good degree, so I get a good job and make money. Well, you know, there are consequences to philosophical thoughts, and this is from John Dewey in the late 1800s, the father of progressive education. I'll let you read it, but I think what I want to point out is at the end, education should seek no goals beyond the enrichment and the improvement of the immediate situation. I argue that's rather short-sighted. Success is measured by continuing education. Wow, no wonder we have so many sub-specialists, right? And having just spent the weekend with my brother-in-law in the hospital, you know, I ran into too many providers. Hey, I'm just the electrophysiologist. I don't really remember the medicine I studied a long time ago. I got to get the hospitalist here. Just so I know my little niche of the world, right? Well, that's because we've just continued training and training and training. Education is all one with growing. It has no end beyond itself. That's a frightening picture, and I hopefully will help you see that. This is an important quote because this comes from the late 1800s, around the time that there was a very clear distinction and movement toward the secularization of education. And Robert Dabney was a very famous Presbyterian theologian at the time. And a couple things I want to point out to you as he talks about the purpose of education is the nurture and the development of the whole man for his proper end. The end must be conceived aright in order to understand the process. So what is the end you have in mind? Even man's earthly end is predominantly moral. Now, dexterity in any art is handling a printer type, a musket, a power loom, in the act, a scalpel. Its secularization might be possible and proper. However, dexterity in the art is not education. The latter nurtures the soul. The only other drills a sense organ or a muscle. But I'll cut down to the last line. Every line of true knowledge must find its completeness and its convergency to God. Even as every beam of daylight leads the eye to sunlight, if religion be excluded from our study, every process or thought will be arrested before it reaches its proper goal. In a word, to the successful pupil, under an efficient teacher, the school is his world. Make that godless, and his life is made godless. I think this is an important quote for you to think about as you enter and as you continue to progress in your training. Well, I want to give you my story. I'll give you my story based upon a quote. And this whole talk is going to be around this quote that has impacted my life along with the folks who introduced me to it. I've been involved in medical student resident education explicitly for the last 15 years. I've been a clerkship director, a program director, an associate dean, and now a dean. And so I have spent a lot of my life in education, but I'll take you back to about 2000 when I had been selected to go to the only military medical school, that is in Uniformed Services University in Bethesda. Competitive, a lot of folks apply for the very few positions. I got it. I was at the top of my game, the peak. And I'll never forget, fall 2000, I'm driving into the hospital just musing over how fortunate, what a blessing for me to be here. And actually, quite frankly, feeling pretty proud of myself. You know, here I am. I made it. The game. I'm here at the teaching school, the only teaching school in the military. Wow. And I popped in the tape from a gentleman named John Patrick called The Highly Intelligent Barbarian. Now, how many of you guys have heard John Patrick? You got to introduce you to him. All right? So John basically spent the next 30 minutes deconstructing my pride. As he pointed out, and he began to show how barbaric most of us who end up in medicine are. And he defined barbarism as somebody who doesn't understand the roots, the culture, the past, where they came from, how they ended up, how their profession is where it is today. And that in medicine, many of us have spent our entire careers studying just medicine, and we don't understand culture, history, the arts, philosophy, and how important that undergirding is to where we are today and where we've been and the mistakes made. And he shared with me this quote from Bernard of Clairvaux, one of the very early universities, so to speak, that started the universities in Paris. He said, there are some who seek knowledge for knowledge's sake, and that is curiosity. There are some who seek knowledge in order that they may be known, and that is vanity. There are some who seek knowledge in order to gain a profit, and that is dishonorable. And there are some who seek knowledge that they may edify others, and that is love. And since I've heard this quote, I've been left with the fact that I've spent most of my career seeking the first two. I'm a pediatrician, so I obviously wasn't seeking the third. The lowest paid specialty out there. But the fourth wasn't there and present in much of my life and much of my career. And it left me feeling very discomforted. Though I felt I was on top of the world, I all of a sudden felt myself somewhat buried. So curiosity, it is a good thing. Don't misunderstand me. It is, in fact, that's actually what drives me more than anything else to this day in many ways. I am so curious of the world. I love medicine because I'm always faced with challenging cases. Even this weekend with my brother-in-law in the hospital, trying to solve his case. And he's a 55-year-old quadriplegic who just had an ablation, and I'm a pediatrician. Right? But I'm trying to solve why he got hyponatremia. I wasn't necessarily so convinced the people taking care of him was interested in solving that issue. Right? And so, yes, curiosity is a big thing, a good thing, and it certainly will help us. But what is its end? Can you guys date this quote? Any guesses? Just give me a big time range. 20th century, 18th century. Protagoras, 440 BC. Right? The sophist. What I point out here is there's nothing new under the sun. Right? There's certainly been those in time and place who have said there is no true end than that. Right? And when curiosity stops with myself and with me, there's a problem. And I think that's important, and perhaps I can illustrate it in this. We are definitely in the information age. There's more information than we have more information at our fingertips than has ever been available in all of history. Right? But you see this quote, they said, knowledge is power. Yes, that's perhaps true. But knowledge and information are not the same thing, correct? And wisdom and knowledge are not the same thing. Okay? Wisdom is knowledge rightly applied. Why is that important? You're here in class every day, filling your brains with information. Hopefully some of it sticks and becomes knowledge. Right? Much of it doesn't. Be frank. But wisdom is, what do I do with that? What is the right thing to do with what has just been given to me? The gift of knowledge, rightly applied, is wisdom. And yet, how much do you hear some talk of wisdom today in our modern education system? Very little, yet it was very prominent in the past. What are some of any of you guys seen this movie, La Vita e Bella? There we go. Fantastic movie. Won the Oscars. Best movie. You know, this picture on the right is a physician, and the main character who won the Academy was a Italian Jew. We lived in Italy for 4 years, so of course I was drawn to the movie as well. And he loved riddles, and he was a waiter in a Rome cafeteria. He waited on this doctor who came down from Germany every once in a while, who also loved riddles, and they both loved riddles. And they made a big deal all the time of trying to stump each other with challenging riddles, and they were very much into this. And it just was their passion. A few years later, this Italian Jew finds himself in a concentration camp in northern Italy. And in the camp, he finds his good friend doctor with the same passion. And he sees the out. This is the way. I can get to him. He can get me and my son out of this camp. And he sets up, and he's been preparing, trying to get ready for this presentation and to meet and to get with him. And he can see the doctor earnestly wants to get with him too. He's feeling good, and they come together in this meeting that you see this picture. And he's ready to express his dilemma, his tragedy. How can he help him? And the doctor goes, I have a riddle I cannot solve, and it's been haunting me. And you see the face. You see the face on the main character as he looks at this, and it just knocks the wind out of him. The doctor was so focused on his curiosity, he couldn't even see beyond to what was the challenge of this man in the camp. How about some other illustrations? What about curiosity? When we get so focused, we leave patients behind. We leave friends behind. Again, in the name of curiosity and answers, we can do other things. Some of these things are not so far from home. You guys, if you haven't had it yet, if you go through your ethics classes, you'll hear about the test that we did here in the States, where we gave folks syphilis but no treatment, and to watch what it would do over a 40-year period. Curiosity before the patient, and before caring for our fellow human beings. So what happens when curiosity wanes, I ask you? What happens when you get paged at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're exhausted? Will curiosity drive you out of bed to check that sodium, to check that lab, to check on that patient? It will wane. What about the tests? Staying up a little bit more because you want to understand and get to know it. What about when you get busy and you have a room full of patients waiting to get in to see you? Will that be enough? You need to think about that. Ecclesiastes, again, I already said nothing new under the sun. Solomon wrote of that. In Ecclesiastes, smoke, vanity is actually the term used in the Old English, but it's really better described as smoke. Vapor is a better translation, and I like this from the Message. Smoke, nothing but smoke. There's nothing to anything. It's all smoke. What's there to show for a lifetime of work? A lifetime of working your fingers to the bone. One generation goes its way, the next one arrives, but nothing changes. It's business as usual for this old planet. Again, chasing curiosity, and as we move on to vanity and other things, you'll find it's nothing but smoke. Yes, it will please for a time, but I think you will hit a time at some point in time where you find yourself empty. How many of you guys have seen Grumpy Old Men? I love this movie too, because I've seen too many grumpy old men. And you know what? I don't want to be a grumpy old man. And you know who most of these guys are? You see them. They have plugged their whole life away, their job, their work, their profession has been everything there is. And all life is when they get that age is how the company didn't give me nothing but a watch. Right? No one respects what I gave. That's why a lot of them die shortly after they retire. Right? They've put everything into their job, their people, their curiosity, their profession, and they're left with little in the end, and they're nothing but grumpy old men. There are some who seek knowledge in order that they may be known, and that is vanity. I like what my mentor has called his CD, his curriculum vitae. How can, yes, and it has been mine. How thick is it getting these days? And as you review others' honors and awards, things that you want to get to, things you want to climb to, it can become your idol. That's why I like this top picture. That idol that I go after, I want to be known. It can be climbing this ladder. You can climb over others. You might actually kick people off the ladder at times because you're so busy trying to get up the ladder. But you forget your patients, your friends, your peers, perhaps your faith, and perhaps your family. You see this a lot in the health professions. Divorce, particularly in training. We're so busy climbing to that next rung, we're stepping all over them to get up. I'd ask if some of you are doing that today, and you need to think about that. Whether it be your faith, your peers, or your family. How many of you have seen The Doctor? A movie worth watching. Okay? I have a video clip, and I'm going to skip it because it's about 10 minutes. But William Hurt is this very arrogant cardiothoracic surgeon. There's some great scenes in this too. He's going around making rounds, and he's just so callous, it's amazing. It's really pretty funny too. It's sad, the influence that he makes on the students who are with him too. And you see the students who are walking behind him is making these very callous comments toward patients. Like, oh, yes, oh, he's such a stud. You see the influence that he's having on folks. And then he ends up with cancer. And he goes to his peers and says, you know, who should I see? And they send him to the stud-ass ENT doctor, who's the absolute best. Goes in to see her, and she treats him like an object. And he's like, he's just stunned, knocked back as he begins to be treated like an object, a piece of flesh in front of her. but not like a person. And he begins to reflect. And he actually goes with the doctor that he made the most fun of to do his surgery. He ended up having laryngeal tumor. And he goes with the doctor that they all made fun of, the one who basically invested in people, talked to people, was caring, loving, and everyone knew he was. And oh, by the way, he had the best outcomes. But they couldn't get past how caring and loving he was of patients. And so they hated him for it. But where did he go to get his care? From this gentleman. And it changed him. Great movie. I would recommend it. So your curriculum vitae, you know, one day, if it's all about climbing the ladder, you only have a couple options. One day you're going to get to the top. You can't stay there forever. You know, if everyone who's not climbing the ladder is one of these, you know, the big loser. So I tell my kids, guess what? You see all of life when folks fall off the ladder as losers. Well, one day you're going to fall off the ladder. And what are you going to be? The big loser. What about the love of money? I think we need to talk about this right out. Our rationalization is remarkably powerful. And I would argue that many of us came into the medical career fields with good intentions and a desire to please and to help people. But you know, there can be other desires, and the drives can be very difficult. I put this balance because at times it might be time. Right? If I see more patients, it's more money, and that may be for my boss. It may be for myself. It will drive your medical care decisions. I have a good friend who's a general dentist up in Purcellville, Virginia. He was in the Air Force, and that's when we became friends. And we got out, and he set up his own practice. He said, Scott, it's hard. You know, every day I'm looking at a patient. I got 2 choices, 3 choices often. I have to catch myself. What is the best choice for this patient versus what's going to pay me the best? Guess what? That's throughout medicine, folks. What is the best choice for the patient? And we can come up with all kinds of great rationalizations. It's the greatest, the newest, the best. Is it really the best? The best for who? Best for me? Best for my patient? Okay, don't pretend that money's not a driver. And it can and it will drive you. And if you don't face it and know that it's there, you're all the more likely to be grabbed. I like this from Timothy. The devout life does bring wealth, but it's the rich simplicity of being yourself before God. Since we entered the world penniless, and we'll leave it penniless, we have bread on the table and shoes on our feet, that is enough. But if it's only for money, if it's only money, these leaders are after it. They'll self-destruct in no time. Lust for money brings trouble, and nothing but trouble. Going down that path, some lose their footing in the faith completely and live to regret it bitterly ever after. I have seen this a lot. I talk about this with my kids a lot, and my daughter. And I say, honey, we are so blessed. She's 16, so we can have these talks. It's nice. You know, I said there's a great thing about money, but you know one of the traps of money is, at times, we can do so much. But as we do so much, we are doing stuff all the time. We're running here, running there. Do we take time to pause? Money's a curse. It can be a curse. It can be a chain. And you have to, as you go into medicine, dental, you have to be aware of this. And you have to say, what am I going to do to vaccinate myself, my family against affluenza? Okay? Affluenza is real. And just like it is very contagious, as you hang out with people who are affluent, you want what they have. The grass is always greener. And just like flu, you have to vaccinate frequently against it. It means it takes a concerted effort. A friend of mine, The Treasure Principle, if you haven't seen this book, it's a great little read. He says he reads this every January, just to reset his priorities as far as money and faith and how to put things in order. I like this other quote on the other side from Abraham Joshua Heschel. Much of what the Bible demands can be compromised in one imperative: remember. Remember. You see this throughout the Old Testament. You see it throughout God speaking to the Jews. Remember Deuteronomy 6 is great. It's the Shema Israel. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy strength. These words which I give you today should be upon your heart. You are to teach them diligently to your children as you walk along the way, as you get up, as you lay down, as you sit at the dinner table. That's the Shema Israel. And it's important because they emphasize the need to, and it goes on to say, because you will come into a land with wells you did not dig, with vines you did not plant. Okay, they were going to the promised land. That's what the verse is from. This is Moses' big speech to them before they go to the promised land. It says, you will forget. Remember, we gave you the well. God gave you the well. He gave you the vines. If you forget, beware. And so again, Deuteronomy 6 is a very powerful scripture to look at as far as remembering. There are some who seek knowledge that they may edify others, and that is love. Boy, this is a long quote, so I think I'm going to go past it so we get in on time. So what are the keys to remembering? And key things to remember? First, the two greatest commands, Matthew 22. Love the Lord. And love thy neighbor as thyself. Okay? Keep first things first. And notice what's first. And in medicine, we can sometimes be pretty good at the second, but forget the first. But the first is important. The second is built upon the first. My argument and what I've put before you today, you love your neighbor better than you love God first. Because there's always kinds of ways you can go awry. God says He's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, and all who live in it are the Lord's. What's the beginning of wisdom? Again, as we said before, wisdom is knowledge rightly applied. Then we should seek wisdom, but what is right? And medicine is an inherently moral activity. I want you to keep your ears open for when somebody says what you ought to do. Anytime somebody says an ought or a should, that is a moral statement. Medicine is full of moral statements every day. Okay? And so I'll just say the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and knowledge. That is throughout the Scriptures. So knowing God and knowing the Scriptures becomes very important. All life and work is sacred. I love using this to my kids. And you know why I show that toilet down there? Because they hate cleaning the toilet. And I say, you know what? That is as sacred as what I do at the bedside with a patient. That is sacred and unto God. And that is something that clearly came out of the Reformation, was this idea that all work is sacred. And here's the verse from Colossians that my kids have memorized to remind them of that. All work is sacred. Don't forget that. Everything that you do, that late night studying for that test is sacred. You're getting that knowledge so that you may edify others, that you know how to wisely apply it. Remember that. That's hard to remember at times. When you look like that young lady in your far left, I guess. I've already talked about this idea. There is no secular or sacred divide in the faith. All things are either in conflict or in harmony with God. And He is in all things. And I'm going to go through this for a lack of time, but just to encourage you. If you know history, it is a pure myth. And you might say, well, listen, Jones, I got it, but faith and science. If I bring faith into a key element and keeping first things first, that's going to conflict with my science and my rational ability to conduct my science. And I'd say, bosh. It's not true. You know the history of science, and you understood the great scientists of the 1700s, the 1800s, and the 1600s. Johannes Kepler, who discovered the ellipse of the planets around the sun. He said, "O God, I am thinking thy thoughts after thee," and he gloried in God after he made the discovery. And he wrote it in his lab book. Sir Isaac Newton, you know Newton wrote more theology than he did science. Far more. He wrote more volumes on theology than he did science, yet he's still viewed as one of the greatest scientists of all times. What about Francis Collins, to bring it to modern day time? For me as a person of faith, the moment of discovery has an additional dimension. It's appreciating something, realizing something, knowing something that up until that moment no human had known. God knew it. Glory in that. What an excitement. There's another famous, and I can't remember his name, the guy who first discovered the double reading frame in DNA. And he said, you know, after he discovered that night, he spent 2 hours just praising God in his laboratory, saying,
Crick.
Oh, what's his name?
Crick.
Crick. No, he discovered
Watson.
DNA. No,
Watson.
neither of them. It was the double reading frame. Not the double reading frame, I'm sorry. The, oh God, the term's left me now. But in RNA, you know that the same piece of RNA can be read twice and have 2 different readings from when you start in the RNA. The guy who discovered it much later, Crick and Watson were people of faith. Then when they start the reading frame, he discovered, he said he praised God for 2 hours in his lab that night. So I'm going to just end here and just say, why are you here? I hope you can put your name on that cake. No, better yet, I hope you have patience in those that you take care of later that will put your name on that cake. That you'll touch their lives, you'll touch the lives of students and others, and that you will bless them because you have the right end in mind as you study and start. Anyways, thank you. I appreciate you.